Well, in being kind of a spiritual orphan, if that's the right word here, when I go about doing my own meditation, like I started doing the Wim Hof method, and
Oh, nice.
even though I did psychedelics in the beginning, as far as I did the Terrence McKenna heroic dose
Oh,
back in
cool.
2016, the only thing that I found was that honestly, and we're going to get into this a little bit later when John comes in, but psychedelics for me was something that I actually think is a crutch and something that doesn't really show you what actually is going on. It may hint at certain things, but it almost feels like if you don't use your own willpower to open certain doors and instead use something to knock those doors open, or like to artificially pry those doors open before you're ready to look at it, you're not really training yourself. And in a way, like if you were to come back into the state of I can do anything I want, I can see anything I want, then like what's the point? What's the point of being here with these limitations? I think the point is to being able to actually work up to understanding without having, without being assisted by external things, because in a way it's like you're training a muscle, like you're working out. But it is also an exploratory process where when I do the meditation now, see the white light in the center and, DNA helix. You guys who are in the chat already, you know what I'm talking about. Blue and purple vortexes, all that stuff. But the idea here is that I think that it's not something that I take for granted, the ability to find information out, but to also be able to go inside, not have to worry about barbarians, with knives slashing your throat or something in the middle of the night, but being able to, through the comfort of your own home, as long as the air is nice outside and stuff, being able to experiment not with drugs but just by going in and seeing what exactly looks the same. Because honestly, like that beautiful window that you painted, the Notre Dame Cathedral, the round window, like how different is that from a mandala? Like it's the same pattern as far as there's a center, things go from the center out, and all these beautiful psychedelic fractal patterns. And in a way, it shows like this play of the world, or like the wheel that not the wheel of fire that Shiva dances around. Like all these things keep repeating and repeating and repeating. So it's like, are the gods real? Are the gods fake? It's like at the end of the day, like if you're exploring these things, you are seeing similarities. And like I'm not saying everything's the same, but do you agree or disagree that it is also important for people who experiment in that way, not doing drugs, but just like going in, that they also, I mean, first of all, are careful not to get deceived, but also that that it may not be a bad thing for people to start seeing similarities between different things and being cosmonauts, astronauts within this psychic plane without the assistance of drugs?
Yeah, it's a good question. Man, I'm loving, we're just boom, we're hitting the big questions.
Mm.
This is great.
Well, that's
Um,
his critique of psychedelia that we'll get into later. But yeah, go ahead.
yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, yeah. Putting psychedelics out of the equation, you did do that. You kind of like phrased it as like cosmonaut, like investigating the mind and stuff, I guess you could say. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I'm a pretty like reasonable, realistic guy deep down. So I have to turn my lens inwards and recognize that I, in some way, react to the climate and tone and way things are discussed around me. So in a total vacuum, I can't say exactly how I would feel about it, but I have like a little bit of a tinge, almost like if I was a cat, I could feel like a little bit of the hairs stand up on my back in a way when we broach those kind of topics, because on the one hand, yes, I do think that there are similar things that underlie the general human experience for a variety of reasons. Some people would probably say it's, partially biological. I would say it's mostly spiritual. But I think on the other hand, and maybe I feel really strongly about this because the opposite view is pumped so heavily, I do have a little bit of a reaction against, I feel like I don't want to say it's a slippery slope, but I feel like there's, I hear, let me put it this way. I hear 100% all the time. Like, yeah, there's all these underlying connections. And like you said, it's not basically the same, but it's a little bit of the subtext is that there's this underlying similarity and stuff like that. So I think maybe for that reason, and because I never hear the opposite, I really never hear people sort of going into the hard differences and parsing it out, that to me, in a way, the differences are almost more important than the similarities. I think partially I have that feeling because when I was going really hard into Buddhism, I did kind of feel that way of like, yeah, there's this tradition over here and this tradition over here. But as I went really deep and started going under the hood into a few different things, I hit a wall with it where I realized actually a lot of these systems are making totally incompatible claims. And I'm seeing in the real world people all the time pretending that they don't exist. So yeah, I mean, that has validity for sure. But like I said, probably because of a reaction to what I perceive in the general spiritual climate, I veer really hard the other way. And I do enjoy like talking to people about it because I feel like there's more differences than similarities, honestly.
But it's good you mentioned that. It seems that there's this, the problem is that there's this problem of, sorry, the problem is that there's this sense of deculturation within a lot of this, and that now that you can sort of pick and choose, people mash things together. And I went through a period of this as well, just like seeing the similarities and everything, and sort of like degrading them to the level of base connection. But it's good that you're aware of that, because I feel a lot of people when they first get into this, especially like going from the same channel of like taking drugs, listening to Terrence McKenna, Alan Watts, stuff like that, imbibing in that revival of the specific psychedelic branch of the new age that happened around like 2010, 2011 or so, when like, the McKenna Renaissance happened, put it that way. And notice how it came about at the same time as the revival of libertarianism as well. And of course we could go down the path, okay, what happened to that? Why was it a failure? Partial failure. Why is it that these hipsters are going to the Amazon basin and like paying money to do this like ayahuasca tourism? And it's now the corporate world takes it over, and now it becomes microdosing to become productive cogs in the neoliberal economic machine. But it's true. It's funny that you're saying you're aware of that, and as an artist, it's almost like you feel like you have an obligation to correct a lot of these prior assumptions in people. I don't know. It's very interesting you bring that up.
But we can narrow it
the
down in a
danger
way.
of it.
Like, I hearken back to when I was listening to the Autistic Mercury episode when you were on, and you were saying similar things. I also remember it was incredibly hot during that episode. I was on Brighton Beach, and I was sweating, and when I went home, I just had to lay down in bed like a corpse for a while, but it was incredibly hot. But anyway, one thing that I wanted to ask you was, if we're talking about... Well, there are two things. First of all, there's the content within the holy texts, and then there's also, what are we doing at the end here, guys? So, what are we doing in the end here, guys, as far as Christianity goes? And again, like, I have to read the Bible fully. I've started reading it. I want to read it all the way, obviously. And when it comes to what is at the end of the tunnel here, there is the allusion to the New Jerusalem. There is this idea of... joining together with God, going under the level, like some people would say that it's you become soldiers in God's army, and there is this fight against good and evil that you still participate in at a higher level. Now, I don't know, like, you correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm not quite getting that correctly, but and there's just this general emphasis on morality and by helping the downtrodden. And there is a similar thing, by the way, in Kabbalah that I was mentioning, this idea of, like, in mystic Judaism, this idea of transmuting the egoism into altruism, so that you become more like they say the creator is, which is all giving without receiving anything. Just this energy of giving, giving, giving. But anyway, if you contrast that with something like Buddhism, where it's like, okay, let's stop this ride. Okay, we've been going on this circle for who knows how long. Okay, that's it. Blow out like a candle, and I'm out of here, guys. Like, that, at least in a very rough sense, seems to be the big difference between the two. And is there any way that these 2 points could be reconciled, or no?
Oh, such a good question. Actually, you hit a little bit of a node for me there, because I feel like part of what turned me on to how much the differences manifest is specifically Buddhism and Christianity. Within Christianity, you do get a lot of people who, I'm thinking like the thinkers, I'm sure normal people have their feelings too, but I'm thinking like thinkers and people who are respected, who have this presumably positive, altruistic. You could say it's rooted in some kind of virtue, I guess, if you want it to be very charitable. Like, oh, there are these guys over here, they have their tradition, but look at how much is really the same. Are we really that different? And ultimately, that's just a really good spot to land on for me, because I actually feel like at the end of the day, there's almost no overlap between Buddhism and Christianity. And I really feel like deep down, you couldn't find two more oppositional worldviews, really. I mean, in my view, there's nothing that manifests on the ground or even in the cosmology that's the same, aside from, yeah, be a good person, I guess. But even that is different within the two systems.
Yes, very diametrically different. Yeah.
Yeah. So like for me, for example, I mean, that's just a really good example for me, because that's where I feel like, if I was, not that this is a debate, obviously, but if I was in a debate with someone, that's like what I would choose to be like, yeah, I can go 100% and defend this, because I mean, there's no overlap really from where I'm sitting. Like Buddhism, without reincarnation, Buddhism totally falls apart. If reincarnation isn't real, then there's no reason to be Buddhist. On the other side, Christianity obviously doesn't have that. Even things like,
although interestingly, that mystic Judaism does have that. I found this out that. Yeah, but like, I don't know. Let me ask you this, because again, I don't want to turn this into a whole debate, but these are like itching questions. These are itching questions that I'm down for a long time. Okay, well, actually, let's rewind a little bit and go back to, okay, let's say if we're talking about Jericho, let's put Jericho into the equation here for a bit. Okay, so
Chris
on one
Jericho?
hand, yeah, on one hand we've got the Bhagavad Gita, where yes, there's this war, and Krishna's like, you got to fight your family, man. What are you gonna do? And then on the other hand, you have Jericho, which is the city that the Hebrews went to, and they killed off everybody except for the prostitute who was who kind of told them like where to go. So again, like, we don't even need to go into Sodom and Gomorrah, because again, you could say like, oh, they were doing, these horrible things. But even Jericho, I don't know what the Jerichians or the Jerichites, I don't know how to even say that, what exactly they were up to. But if you have a command from on high that tells you, all right, you gotta take care of these people, like, how different is that from the Bhagavad Gita?
I can't answer that, actually.
Yeah, but that's Hinduism. I mean, even the command from on high is like totally alien in the Buddhist context. But
but I definitely, sorry, I don't interrupt you. I'm just kind of amped.
No, go ahead. Yeah. Well, I would say that Taoism and Christianity have somewhat a bit more similar. But you were going to make a point before Owen, and then finish the. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, yeah. Also, just for the record, just as like, again, like a meta note, like I'm cool to meet anyone where they're at while I'm here. If anyone comes on and they're like, I'm going to tell you why you're literally wrong about everything, honestly, I'm kind of down. So no one's going to offend me. No one's going to offend me is all I'm getting at. But yeah, so if the question is, well, I'm looking at the Bhagavad Gita, and this guy is supposed to go fight this battle against all these people and kill them because it's his duty. And I'm looking at the Old Testament, and these people are supposed to go fight this battle and kill them because it's their duty. I mean, isn't there some underlying similarity there? Well, the thing is that honestly, I would point to the underlying structure of why those things are justified and say that they're, again, pointing to differences, because in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asks Krishna, there's all these people on the other side, but I feel like the crux there is they haven't done anything wrong, and I'm going to go kill them just because they happen to be on the other side of this battle. And the justification is rooted in reincarnation. Krishna explains to him, yeah, you're going to go kill this guy that was like your fourth grade, grammar teacher, but it doesn't matter, bro, because he's going to get reincarnated. He's going to get born again. You're going to get born again. So really, it doesn't matter at all. Whereas if we're looking at the Old Testament, I think that it's a different situation. I think that the structure that the two stories are held into is so different that I don't think it points to an underlying similarity. There's also the fact that it's in the Old Testament. So then that has to be contextualized, if we're doing it in a Christian context, via the New Testament. So that's another thing. Like if you're looking at Christianity, I mean, you guys probably know, but other people might not. If you're looking at the Old Testament, you have to look at it through the lens of the New Testament, because that's how those laws and things and everything were fulfilled. So if you think about it, I mean, if Jesus was there, and let's say there's a New Testament situation hundreds of years later or whatever, and someone's like, there's this battle, should I go kill these people that are totally innocent? I feel like usually the Christian answer would be like, no. I mean, if it's like a defensive war and we could get into like when war is justified, but I think that the fact that in the Bhagavad Gita, the justification is, dude, it's fine because they're going to get reincarnated. That again loops into this whole system where it's kind of hard to overlay. Yeah.
But what would be the justification for Jericho? That's what I don't get.
Well, they were evil, Lev. They were. This
all
was
of
also,
them, even the kids, even the little Jericho children running around playing with goats.
It's because like it said, I forget the exact passage. God hath given them over to a reprobate mind. They were given over to their sin, and it's a different. Yeah, Owen is correct 100% in that. Jericho or Sodom and Gomorrah were the case where there is a moral. There's a moral comportment there. There's a moral action there. There is sort of like, there isn't a context of, well, in terms of like the cosmology of Hinduism, there is like, karmic debt and so forth. And it's like, everyone's going to get reincarnated, blah, blah, blah. And the cycle repeats. And then eventually you will achieve moksha after like thousands upon thousands of times. It's more of like these people totally abandon God. And therefore they resign their lot to whatever happens to them. So
I think also for me, if you're asking me, there's definitely someone who would be more theologically qualified. So I just like to, when I'm talking to people, a caveat that like people shouldn't listen to what I'm saying and be like, that's how it is. You should think of me as like a guy like at the bar or something, basically.
Well, speaking of more theologically qualified, we have Gravantus, who is joining us right now, right in the nick of time. Right in the nick of time. Yes, and by the way, guys, send super chats right now. Don't forget to subscribe to BTR. We are the greatest podcast / live stream series of all time, and go to patreon.com/breaktherules. And here's the thing. Listen, guys, go to Patreon, and what you are going to get, and look, usually I put this on the screen so that none of the people in Zoom are able to see it, but you know what, we have a very special guest today. We have Owen Cyclops, so I'm not going to do that to you. Instead, what I am going to do is I'm going to go over to my Windows 10 search bar, because I should have prepared these in advance, and I did not, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to search for the word magnet. By searching for the word magnet, I am going to load up my father's wooden magnets. Here we go. Let's see, magnets. Everybody loves magnets. So
how do they work?
Every
episode with a stupid joke. Every episode.
It's real though, because no one knows how they work. No one knows.
Exactly. So, okay, so guys, this is what you get when you become a $20 patron. Check this out. So these are the magnets that my father created. You could see the beautiful wooden texture here: maple, mahogany, ashwood, cherry. And you could see some of my dad's paintings over here below. I'm going to put them for Owen as well to check out. I think you'll appreciate the
it looks pretty
quality.
Cool.
Yeah, my dad is my dad is great. And so for $20 tier reward, this is what you get. You get a one-of-a-kind wooden sculpture. For $30 tier reward, now I don't know where this is in my document, so this is something that I'm going to link to separately, but I am going to play that really fast video. You know the one, Gio, the one of you doing the prints. So if you become, oh, hold on, that's not it. Here we go. If you become a $30 patron, you are going to get beautiful prints from the TFW No GF series created by Giovanni Pennacchietti.
1 out of 5 at random. You will get one at random.
That's so
exactly. And also, if you become a $50 patron, not only do you get that, but you also get Gio's beautiful series of paintings from the Bob Ross series. And not only do you get that, but you get a completely custom, commissioned, whatever you want, wooden magnet, in addition to the other wooden magnet made by my dad. In addition to that, if you want to, you will get a printout of any of the thumbnails that my dad painted from our live streams. And in addition to that, you also get a beautifully painted action figure that Jules Hamilton painted. So you get all that
from Warhammer. Wait, what did you call it, Lev? Warhammer 40K.
Exactly. Oh, yes, and Josh, I am bringing in Nina. I sent her the invite, so Nina should be coming in pretty soon. It is 5:50. I think she is going to be coming in at 6. Nina is very fascinating. She's covered a lot of these things having to do with religion. But it is interesting, though, like, I can't go back in time. I understand a lot of these things are held in faith, but as far as there being an entity out there who would command somebody to kill an entire city, it's like it's still difficult for me to, people have a hard time agreeing, on look at America. People have a hard time agreeing on the politics here. People are so divided. It's hard for me to imagine so many people would agree that we're all just going to be these horrible people worthy of God's wrath, and not one or two. I mean, that does go back kind of to the argument that what was it hold on, what's the name? What is wrong with me? Hold on. The guy who fled from Sodom into that little town, and then his wife turned into.
I did that.
That's you. Well, there we go. So you know exactly what happened. Well, no. What is wrong with me? Hold on. Jacob. Lot. No, not Lot. Lot was his.
Yeah.
Well, no. Lot also fled, but wasn't it Jacob who fled as well?
No, it was Lot. It was Lot and his wife.
Oh, okay.
Daughters. And his wife had turned back, and she turned into salt.
Yeah, which is also an interesting thing, like what exactly that means. But right now we're talking about Sodom and Gomorrah. I understand that Sodom and Gomorrah must have been pretty bad places, and I assume that if we are talking about Jericho, it also must have been a pretty bad place. But still, like, if we are talking about that trading, like, again, I don't think it was just Lot. Who was the guy who was fighting with God, fighting with the angel that came down there, who said he was God?
Oh, yeah, that's Jacob wrestling.
Yeah, Jacob. There we go.
Yeah,
yes.
It was renamed Israel, which is struggle with God. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Jacob's ladder. Yeah.
So the interesting thing for me here is that he was kind of haggling with God as far as like, like there must be at least this many people who are good, or this, so this was a conversation that was also occurring, in the Bible and the Torah back in the day. But I still find it just to be very strange, and I want to open this up to Gravantus as well here. I find it to still be very strange that there is this broad command to just like go nuclear on a city like that, and that there isn't any part of people that feel that, maybe, like what an entity of this sort, the entity that's responsible for everything in existence, would that really be something that the same entity that's associated with Jesus Christ, who was always, commanding, turn the other cheek and, do unto others as you would have done unto you. Like, it's strange for me to see the two of them coexisting as the same entity.
I mean, Jesus Christ also drove the money changers out of the temple with like a whip, and he says himself, he's going to come again to judge, the living and the dead, and cast,
I hand you a sword.
Yeah, into the fire. So I mean, I don't.
And now GameStop is driving the money changers.
For me, also something that. Wait, I don't want to cut you off. Is there more to your answer?
Yeah, it's just because there's the idea of I would say like an extreme spiritual wickedness, and I think some people kind of get caught up in the specifics, the idea of what if there were children or something like that. But we have to keep in mind, at least from the Christian perspective, that this life isn't the end. So say hypothetically Sodom and Gomorrah gets wiped out, and there was sort of a child who didn't participate in the wickedness of Sodom and Gomorrah. It's not as if the child's going to suffer the same fate as, say, the men who tried to rape the angels. There's still that afterlife aspect that we have to keep in mind. And if, in that sense, that if the child was, in a sense, taken before he could develop this wickedness, in the end, that's a better fate than, if he had been one of the ones trying to rape an angel.
But then we can dissect this a little bit more, because in a way, like, let's take what you're saying right now as, these kids or these innocents, at least they have, at least they'll be able to live again. And I know that living again in this case would imply living in the kingdom of heaven. But in the case of Buddhism, or in the case of the Advaita Vedanta, Bhagavad Gita, what Owen was talking about before is that their version is, at least you'll be able to live again as in reincarnate into this world. So there is still this aspect of at least, which may justify this killing. And the troublesome thing for me, at least, is that, and again, I know every religion has always had warlike aspects. I'm not going to lift one above the other, although I could say there are some who do more than others. But as far as Christianity goes, I mean, let's face it, there were all these different Christian wars, Protestants fighting with Catholics, and, the whole shebang. And sometimes I wonder, like, would there be something within that could also justify the same thing, whether it's like a Buddhist going to war in India and justifying the killing with reincarnation, people being able to justify.
There is a book, Zen at War, that Zizek talks about. It's actually a very good book about how, like, they say things like, when you drive the knife into your enemy, it's like really the knife is not there. It's all mutually originated, and it's really the context of Shunyata itself that has to go into the chest of the enemy.
Yeah, I was going to say
Tibetans were killing each other all the time, straight up, just for the record.
Straight up.
Wait,
One
thing I do
as
want to
the
say
Zoomers
quickly,
say.
before we keep going, one thing I do want to say quickly is that, just since before it's already in the rearview mirror, but before it totally goes away, we were comparing this to the Bhagavad Gita. I think that, just again, it's a totally different context, because for me personally, the view that I have taken with regards to the Old Testament that kind of has put it all into one cohesive story is that part of it, at least, again, I'm not a theologian, I'm not going to say that every time as a warning, so don't believe everything I'm saying, but for me, part of the context is God preparing humanity, and specifically a group of humanity, to be in his direct presence. And that involves a lot of weird things, like maybe animal sacrifice and stuff like that. So we could go into like, well, but you really have to kill this village of people to do that. But it's just interesting, because if you compare it to the Bhagavad Gita, it's literally the total opposite, because in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna is literally talking to Krishna. He's literally talking to God already. Whereas when we zoom into the Old Testament here, that's God sort of almost not indirectly acting, but acting so that later on in the story, those people will be equipped to be in his presence in the first place.
Also,
so there's this historical view that is unique in a way, in my opinion, to Christianity. Like in Hinduism, it's this epic millions of cycles, but in Christianity, it's like, here's point A, here's point B.
Eschatology
you're on the ride. Yeah, exactly.
No, I could see that. I could see that perspective, but we were talking before about Israel fighting with God. What wasn't God? Or no, he was fighting with the angel, but God was still in the presence of Israel. Like, God came down. That was literally God that came down with his angels. So in that sense, God was already part of the picture from there on in, as an actual being, unless I'm mistaken. Again, like, I don't want to take this out of context, so please correct me if that's not right.
I think people can see angels, but they're not God. There are theophanies in the Old Testament, like where people see God in a limited sense, but I think an angel as a messenger is not the same thing as like the full incarnate.
No, but wasn't one of them the God, or no?
Yeah, in the Old Testament, the figure known as the angel of the Lord, that is the pre-incarnate Christ.
That's right.
And you kind of see that in the testament of the burning bush, in which, the angel of the Lord descends into the bush and then speaks as God. So there's kind of like this distinction, and yet they're one and the same.
And then Christ had to become man.
Yeah.
After. So there's already that linkage in the Old Testament to the New Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And certain people of sorry, I'm not going to go down the road. I'm not going to talk.
Well, speaking of speaking of
Jewish people.
No. Speaking of, I was gonna say, speaking of burning bush, we have with us Nina Paley joining us back here with us. And before that, Aman sent us $5. Thank you so much, Aman. 5 Canadian bucks, and says, tell Owen to say AXN ya, pronounced AXNya.
I'll say it for $5. AXNya.
There
I hope
we
it's
go.
not a spell or something. If it is, I disavow.
So Nina, you came at a pretty good time. We were just talking about the Old Testament. You did a whole movie called Sadomasochism about the Old Testament, and we were contrasting these two interesting views. Where if we're talking about Hinduism and Buddhism, it's this cycle that people are in, and you can escape that cycle. If we're talking about Christianity, and before that, we're talking about the Torah and all that. Like, it's an interesting thing for me to think about here. Like, what exactly to you is the differentiation and the things that were talked about before about, let's say, God having to get people ready for Jesus, in which, like, at first, of course, there will be human sacrifice. Not human. No. Of course, there'll be animal sacrifices.
Well,
Of course,
actually,
there will
Lev,
be...
when you're talking about the Israeli, no,
Whoa. Okay.
Don't worry, kayfabe.
Okay.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. So if we're talking about, like, God, okay, I want to prepare these people to a higher level of existence. So I'm gonna excuse the animal sacrifices. That's fine. I'm gonna excuse the stoning. I'm gonna excuse.
Not going to excuse it. He's commanding it.
Well,
He's
okay. This is what we want to get.
animal sacrifices and requiring stoning. That's very explicitly laid out in Leviticus and also in Exodus.
So let's get into this. Like, Owen, would you say that all of this stuff would have been kind of important to establish this covenant from which people would then be able to get out of it through the power of Jesus?
I don't know if I would necessarily phrase it that way, but if you're saying, was it necessary? Well, yeah, that's evidentially the case. Yeah. But I wouldn't say to get out of it. I would say, for me, I view it as a long arc from the fall and totally corrupted human nature to God. I don't want to say figuring out because it's providential, but going through a process wherein these people can receive God fully. So that's, I think, keeping that in mind is kind of a key to it. You know, if you were working with like a really sick, deranged, literally like spiritually ill, fallen group of people, it's not going to be like, here's this book, read it. So of course there's a mystery aspect to it, but if you're asking me if it was necessary, yeah, I'll take that stand. Sure, for sure.
We're like, here's this book, write it.
Yeah.
So Owen, I love your art. I got to look at it for the first time this week, and I just absolutely love it. It's great.
Oh, cool. Thanks.
And I also missed the earliest part of this podcast. I came in about 25 minutes into it. So I didn't hear if you were raised with any religion. Were you raised Christian? And then
No.
you went on your outer path? Like, what's your family's, like, or do you come from a family that had Christians in it? I mean, do you come from European?
No, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, I mean, I can't, you just have an avatar, so I can't even see if you're.
Actually, that's what I look like. My head is an oblong, actually.
You said that you were like the archetype, earlier you were the archetype of the nerdy white guy that was into Buddhism.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, I mean, if I had to just paint like a super quick arc, no, I was raised in kind of like I mean, they wouldn't describe themselves this way, but it really is like material atheism. You know what I mean? Maybe someone like mentions God, but no one really like believes in it.
But did your family, like, did you have Christmas in your family? Were you like
an entirely secular
context? Way? Okay.
If I were to say like we're celebrating Jesus's birthday, that would have been really strange. It would have been
but that is nonetheless quite different from me, because my family made a point of not observing Christmas or Easter, not even in the secular way that everybody else does.
Yeah.
So even if your family was secular, even if they were atheists, if they came from a Christian tradition, which they probably did, if they're white, then I would say that even if they weren't like practicing religious, you had some Christian cultural background in your upbringing.
Yeah, well, the only reason I wouldn't describe it that way is because, like, right now, for example, my family, they kind of know that I'm Christian now, but not really. And I feel like when or if I tell them, it's going to be like the weirdest thing on the planet. Like, I'll definitely never tell my grandmother because she would just lose it. People could say that's dishonest. I mean, whatever. I'm just being real with you guys. So it's almost like within that secular, materialist, atheist world, there is a very like anti-Christian aspect to it sometimes. And a lot of people where I'm from are on that page. So that's the page that my family's on for sure.
Sure. But it's like, that's still a world of difference than like if you were a second generation South Asian, whose family was all, came from a Hindu tradition.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you have a different cultural, like, religion. The fact that we separate religion from the rest of culture, that's a modern thing.
That never happened throughout human history. Yeah, never.
And so religions fascinate me.
But Nina, the reason that is because it's not because of secularism per se. It's because the liberal religion had to crush all of the competing religions in the public square. So they created the private public sphere when it comes to religion. But that's my own autistic political theory. So don't worry about it.
Okay. Well,
oh, and by the way,
right.
real quick, we have Drew Arnold, then we have James MK Ultra Money in the house. Everybody subscribe. Look at his Matrix shirt. By the way, can you stand it for a second? Just look at
People
this.
thought it was Mountain
Why?
Dew.
Wow, that's literally
Why should we
legit.
look at this?
That's
Fucking rules.
that's pretty awesome.